I was so excited about having a desk to record at, and that's just gone so badly. Oh boy, here we go. We've done ghetto before, but this is as ghetto as it ghettos.
What's gone wrong, Ryan?
So, I'm doing my summer school work for the year. It's a very nice job to have. I get to stay in a very nice, fancy public school for a few weeks. Unfortunately, I do have to live out of a suitcase. A suitcase which unfortunately did not contain my microphone. I brought a lot of other really useless stuff, but I didn't bring my microphone. So here I am, recording on my phone, on a bed, in a very hot room of a very old building, with paper notes, and children running around everywhere. This is about as opposite as it gets to where I first started recording this podcast, which was in a proper recording studio.
I forgot about that, yeah, wow.
I feel like it's all gone downhill.
Yeah. You've steadily gone down market with your recording setup.
Yeah, just a bit. And I'm also physically and mentally exhausted, so it's going to go great.
It's going to be a good episode.
Don't work with kids. It's not good.
Yeah, so that's a lesson I took to heart from a very young age.
Even as a kid, you refused to work with kids. Just a lone soldier.
Yeah, quite happy working, well, I was going to say working with people my own age, but they're not really my own age. Quite happy working with people twice my age.
You're the young buck of your company.
For now, yeah. Well, not in the company. Like in the company, there are people that are younger than me, but in the department, yeah, I'm currently the youngest, but not for much longer.
Everyone's just looking at you, begrudging your youth.
I hardly think so.
I mean, you're a fairly healthy guy. They must not appreciate that. Old people hate fitness.
Not the people I work with.
Oh, are they all fitter than you?
Considerably, yeah.
Well, get it together, Sam.
I'm working on it.
I've actually been lifting weights.
Oh, get you.
Yeah, where I'm working, we've got a gym on site. I know what a deadlift is now. It's great.
I've actually got a pull-up bar arriving tomorrow. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
You see, the problem with the pull-up bar is that you have to already be strong enough to do a pull-up.
Yeah, I can't do a pull-up.
Are you sure you're there?
I can't do a pull-up, but there are ways of like training up to it.
By doing what? Like having someone partly lift you?
Well, so you can do, like, if you get a bar that's sort of like various heights, right? If you get a one that's lower down, right, so that you can basically sort of pull yourself up, but like with at an angle. It's like doing rows is one way of doing it. So you're sort of doing.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know, where it's sort of like almost like the reverse. If you imagine you're doing a push-up, if you just literally rotate yourself through 180 degrees, and now you've got a bar that you're pulling yourself towards. It's that.
So now you're laying on your back on the floor with your arms out in the air.
Yeah, and then you grab a bar and you pull yourself up to it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like one way you can start. And then the other thing to do is you'd sort of with like the help of a chair or whatever, you'd sort of like hold yourself at the up position of a pull-up, and then slowly and in control, you lower yourself down to sort of where you're hanging, and then you'd sort of do that in reps, and then eventually you'll be able to go the other way as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Exercise tips from Spinnerproof. Two people that should not be giving out exercise tips.
Yeah. Should we move on? Shall we continue or start a new discussion about fork versus forks? / this segment is, I'm going to concede a point here. I think I overthought it, and I thought fork was correct, but I think every time I've thought about it since, the natural thing to say is forks, so I'm going to go with that.
I think I know what swayed you. It was a little WhatsApp conversation, wasn't it?
What, where I sent you a picture of a fork?
Yeah, a picture of what was clearly a fork with 4 tines, and you said, "Look at my forks." So I sent you back a picture of a cocktail stick and said, "Look at my fork," and you realised how wrong you were.
Yeah, so the weapons on robots, I think I will call them lifting forks or whatever. But
now, of course, we have to expand the discussion.
Oh no.
We can't just agree on something. We need to find the robot version of a spork. This was a lovely little Twitter conversation, wasn't it?
Yes. Max. Oh, how do you pronounce his surname even? Like, this is weird. This shouldn't be a hard...
You see, you shouldn't have got into it in the first place. You don't do name pronunciations.
It's an oddly hard surname to pronounce. Owers? I don't know. Max Owers. I'm going to go with that. I'm sorry, man. Sent us a picture of the knife of robots, which is quite funny. And then we started thinking about what would a spork of robots be. I don't know if you have. I don't know if you've had any thoughts on the spork.
I have two answers, and they're very much at the ends of the Spork spectrum. And I truly believe that somewhere out there is the perfect mid-ground. But at one end of the spectrum, you have Series 3 Panic Attack, which had the lifting forks, but with this kind of weird decorative flare at the hinged side.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, for a change.
And then at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you've got modern Behemoth, where the scoop has the tiny little teeth on it.
Ooh, that's pushing it, I think.
It's a very spoony Spork, in the same way that Panic Attack was a very forky Spork. Already I'm just confusing myself massively here. But those are the best I can do for now. If anyone's got a mid-ground, I want to hear about it.
I think that Scorpios sort of is that area because it's got the two sort of things that are running across the floor where they're not. I wouldn't necessarily call them a fork, and they're not really a wedge of any description, and they're kind of like a scoop, but not really. I don't know. Like I think that's quite an interesting one for like the spork of these things.
Because saw blades you wouldn't really bring into the discussion.
No, that's much more
But
like...
with Scorpios being curved, suddenly it's very much in that realm of Spork, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's because it's sort of curved and because it's flat, whereas the saw blades one is closer to wedgy type things, even though it's sort of not a wedge.
I haven't put it onto a diagram yet, so no one knows what it is. I haven't made my definitive judgment. But yeah, I think you might have nailed it there, as much as it pains me to say.
I hold my hands in the air in a victory pose. I have won
Good
this
for
discussion.
Another point before we get into BattleBots properly, very interesting little post came up on Reddit the other day, and I cannot for the life of me remember who posted it, but it will be in the show notes, with probably my favourite bit of behind-the-scenes information to date, which is that the producers were offering a cash money bounty for teams that were willing to take on Tombstone and Minotaur.
Wow, that's an interesting idea.
I'd love to know how much it was.
Did anyone take them up on that?
I mean, presumably.
I guess it just hasn't happened yet. Maybe.
I mean, I'm guessing Tombstone versus Minotaur was one that the producers just said, yes, this is happening. But you can kind of imagine Duck going, yeah, we'll take that. And you can kind of imagine Gigabyte going, yeah, we'll take that.
Yeah.
Whiplash, I don't know. Maybe they weren't given a choice. But it's still a very interesting way of running things, especially as far as I'm aware, and I'm sure there'll be many builders out there that can refute this if it needs refuting, but as far as I'm aware, teams didn't get the build stipends that they used to get for this series. I don't even know if prize money is even on the line, because in that section of the rules that were published, it was still left TBD. So you have to imagine the idea of, getting some cash for taking on one of the big boys, and basically being guaranteed to be a main event as well, would have been quite appealing to a lot of people.
I wonder though, so does that bounty apply if it's a matchup that the producers would have wanted anyway? Like, let's say, like you said, sort of like the Minotaur versus Tombstone was kind of like a given. Do either of those robots get the bounty for the other one?
Simple answer, I don't know. I would imagine that the producers had one or two fights they definitely wanted those robots to do, and then instead of basically sending some poor lamb to the slaughter for the others, they decided to give the lamb a choice of how it died.
Well, Monsoon expressed an interest in fighting Tombstone, so I wonder if they went for it.
Well, we do know what Tombstone's 4 fights are.
Okay, the general public might, but I don't.
Oh, okay. It was literally shown on the very first episode when they were explaining the format. So Tombstone had their Minotaur fight, their Gigabyte fight that we've seen, and they supposedly have Duck and Whiplash coming up.
Okay.
Duck is an especially interesting fight. Whiplash, I mean, there's a possibility there. Possibility that Whiplash does something.
Yeah, anything's possible.
The likelihood, however, is they'll get mashed up.
Yeah, I suspect Tombstone is going to win all those fights.
Oh, I don't know about Duck. Duck is basically built to take on a big horizontal bar.
Yeah, but Tombstone is the king of big horizontal bars.
Yeah, but bear in mind that Duck's predecessor, Whoops, did beat Last Rites. Although Whoops has a sort of heavier shield up front, I think Duck, because they had to put the lifter mechanism in, is maybe slightly less durable. But it's still a very durable design, optimised for that kind of fight.
Yeah. It'll be interesting.
That's probably the fight I'm looking forward to most out of the ones we know we have coming up, actually. That and the Blacksmith Minotaur rematch. I'm looking forward to that greatly.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting fight as well. Hmm.
Intrigue abounds.
Indeed. Shall we dive in to episode 9 of BattleBots?
I think that would be wise.
So we start with Chomp versus Huge.
I would love to let a huge rip right now, but I just can't do it in my current setting.
I'm sorry, man.
I mean, did anybody see this fight going any other way?
It's interesting because I think a hammer is probably one of the more effective weapons against Huge, because like the join in the middle must be. It's probably not. I'm not going to go quite so far as to say flimsy, but it must be like the weakest point of that robot. So you can imagine like a nice hit just off to the right or the left of that bar spinner from like a big hammer like Chomp or like Beta even or whatever. Like if it were in here, hitting that could almost snap Huge in two.
I agree, but Chomp is not the robot to deliver it, because they have no way of delivering that strike without getting hit themselves.
Yeah, they haven't quite got the reach.
And of course they have the width on the arm, which means they're going to get caught by the bar.
Yeah.
Whereas something like Beta, for example, could kind of slot the arm alongside the danger zone and make that hit, rather than getting hit themselves.
How great would that hit be?
You see, I like Beta, but I like Huge more.
Oh no, I would love to see Huge snapped in half. I think that'd be amazing.
Well, I have good news for you, and that is that I can't remember if it's the featherweight or beta-weight version has had that happen a couple of times. The one that I can remember was Robert Cowan's robot, Crippling Depression, which usually has an undercutting spinner. He just ran the robot upside down so the disc was on top, managed to get a good side swipe on the bar, and broke him in half that way.
Oh, nice.
But of course, the scaling from that weight to a heavyweight, I don't know if they would have increased the strength of that joint, decreased it, no idea which way it would have gone.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about that is it's not level. If you look at that robot, it's not like those two boxes on the left and right they're not coplanar, as it were. They are like tilted inwards a little bit. So I think even just the weight of the robot is enough to sort of give that a little bit of bowing. So yeah, I don't know how strong it is and how much it would hold up against a solid hit with a hammer in the middle, but I think that would be an amazing thing to see regardless.
Is it bowing, or is it just built that way to accommodate some components that were slightly larger?
I don't know, actually. I guess you'd have to sort of compare it both ways up, I suppose.
If it was bowing, then you'd imagine there'd be some more bounce that we'd see.
I think it does bounce a little bit.
Well, it does, but that's mostly through the wheels rather than the body section, as far as I can tell.
Closer analysis is probably required.
Another thing that's always going to make it quite tricky to judge Huge is the fact that all the wheels are hand cut, so they're never going to be quite the same. And I wonder if that adds a bit of wonkiness as well.
Yeah.
Chomp, however, is tough.
Yeah, that Chomp took a lot of hits. And it sort of like at the end of it didn't, with the exception of its weapon, it didn't look like it had just spent like 3 minutes with a big spinner, really. Like in the same way that the other robots come out of a 3 minute fight with a big spinner and they look a lot worse. So yeah, Chomp's tough robot.
And it isn't that Huge isn't hitting very hard, because we've seen the damage that it did to Free Shipping and Sub-Zero.
Yeah.
And I think that while it is fashionable to dislike Chomp, I will point out that that robot has never been incapacitated. It's been flipped, but it's never broken down. It's never stopped working.
That's a good trait to have in a combat robot.
Yeah, it makes it pretty hard to lose. Although it's even harder to lose when you've got biased judges on your side.
Oh, God.
Said everyone on Reddit that week.
Why have you done that?
I'm still annoyed about it. I'm still so angry about it, and I don't even know why. I mean, admittedly, I do like being angry. That's part of it, but it's not all of it.
That's a very healthy way to live.
Huge as well, it's worth mentioning, seems to really have the ability to go 3 minutes without the weapon stopping, which is quite impressive considering the amount of hits they tend to dish out.
Yeah, they're both surprisingly robust robots, really, aren't they?
I mean, with Huge, it's almost not surprising, because it's got that sort of inherent shock-absorbing property.
Yeah, again, I guess just because of the force that's going to go back through it, and again, because the middle of that robot just seems quite weak to me. I don't know, I would have expected the weapon to die more than it has, so, I don't know. Surprisingly, seems to me like it's surprisingly tough.
I think for me, the surprise is more that it's a new build that works reliably.
Yeah.
Well, as reliably as we can claim it to be over 3 fights.
Well, over 3 fights, we've established it's almost infinitely more reliable than Foxic or Predator.
Can't argue with that as much as I'd like to. Should we move ahead to Warhawk Brutus,
Let's do it.
where reliability is slightly more of an issue?
Yeah, this is a weird fight where they both sort of keep switching places, I guess, a little bit with who's lost what.
Everyone broke down in some way at some point. It's a weird battle because they made a big point of stating how similar these robots are, and yet I can't help liking Warhawk significantly more.
Why?
I think it's the four-wheel drive that does it. I just really like the sort of squat look of that four-wheel drive system, whereas Brutus looks a lot more... Brutus kind of looks like you could easily model it in Lego. Which isn't an inherently bad thing. But it does have a very simplistic look, which maybe makes it deceptive in a way, because it is a pretty good machine. It's delivering some big hits when it needs to.
Yeah, I think Warhawk is a more interesting looking machine, isn't it? I think it's got a more interesting shape and more interesting paint job as well.
Yeah. I think it's also got a really interesting build in terms of the way it's kind of got the three modules. There's a left drive, a right drive, and a weapon module, which all seem to be joined in a very sort of, well, I'm saying this too much, I'm saying too much about shock isolation, and it's annoying me already, but it seems to basically be rubbered together. And you can see there's a lot of flex in that body when it gets hit, and I really love watching that.
Yeah.
Not that it helped. Not that it helped at all.
No, they lost their drive pretty early and were sort of in that interesting grey area of the rules where I think for a long time they were, were they immobile, were they not? They were just sort of like flapping around without leaving their circumference, so...
They were leaving their circumference, they were gyro dancing out of it, which I'm kind of okay with. The time I have a problem with stuff like that is, for example, Lucky against Sawblaze, where they were clearly immobile on one side for about 2 minutes of the fight. Or Overhaul versus Chomp. Had it run longer, I feel like Overhaul would have been counted out immobile for being broken on the left side. They're the situations where I have a real problem with it. When you've got a vertical spinner and the weapon is working, you've still got some mobility.
Yeah, I don't know. They didn't. I don't know. I'm not overly fond of gyro dancing as mobility, but it's fine. I mean, it was interesting, I guess, because what we got out of that was that Brutus's weapon did come back to life, and we did get the final few big hits at the end there, which was quite cool.
And the late hit, of course. The late hit, which kind of backfired. Maybe it's a bit harsh to call it a late hit. I think they went in because it looked like Warhawk were mobile again.
How did it backfire? I'm struggling to remember that.
Well, they went in for a final hit on Warhawk, and Warhawk ended up hitting them, because they rode up its wedge and onto the disc.
I can't remember this fight very well. This is annoying.
Preparation.
My notes are not thorough enough this time, it seems.
It's almost like neither of us were fully prepared for this. Yeah, that is kind of all there is to say on that fight. If anything, I only wanted to talk about it so that I could say how much I like Warhawk.
Yeah, Brutus won that, and yeah, it was an all right fight. It was an all right fight. Didn't stand out to me, but...
That's fair enough. I think Shredderator Petunia is another one that doesn't particularly stand out.
What? How can you say this doesn't stand out?
Well, Petunia as
won.
a defensive wedge is very good. As an offensive wedge to support a crusher, it is atrocious.
Yeah,
How long did it take them to get far enough under?
It's not ideal for that, but when they did, and they punctured a battery. I mean, I'm happy.
All right, Josh Valman, calm down.
We got a lipo fire, lots of beautiful smoke at the end there from a crusher. That's what I like to see.
I'm not sure they did that by crushing.
There was a hole in the top of the... What did you think they did?
No, here's what I believe happened.
Here we go.
After Shredderator had basically already died near the screws, they took half a day to get under it so they could get a grip. They then went over to the pulverizer, hammered the crusher in using that, and that was what punctured it.
I still think that's awesome. So
if anything, that's probably more kudos from me.
Oh, can you imagine designing your robot around that idea? Have like a barely mobile thing that's got like a proper nail on the end of it. Almost like imagine like a hand-shaped thing that comes down with a nail and puts it over there, and you got a gripper somewhere else, and then goes and hammers a nail into them.
That's something Complete Control should have done.
Now that you're allowed projectile weapons, could you do that and then leave the nail in them, in your opponent?
I mean, is that really even a projectile at that point?
I know, but like it's almost like an intentional way of leaving a part of your robot in someone else. Would
I
that
mean,
be allowed?
if you're going to go projectile and nail together, you just build a massive nail gun.
No, but I think having like an arm thing that comes down, carefully places a nail on top, uses the arena hammer to hammer it in there, and then just lets go of it and drives away. That would be glorious.
I mean, I feel it's better if you spike into an opponent in whatever way. I think it's better to leave it in there than it is to stay attached and ruin the fight.
Yeah.
So I'd rather there was some kind of breakaway weapon than something that just got stuck and didn't come out.
I mean, like reloadable nail things you can hammer multiple nails in.
Oh man, there's an outweight idea.
Oh.
Just need to find an outweight arena that has hammers.
Yeah.
And sure, that's not a thing around here.
Well, it can become a thing. Someone get on that.
Here's this thing we want to see. We're not going to do it ourselves. It's your problem now.
Look, we're ideas people.
Evidently, yeah. Often bad ideas.
I like just ideas. That's all we promise. Is just ideas.
Well, it was, I suppose, a very modern Crusher win, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It isn't like Crushers are particularly going to get a lot of holes in an opponent, but if you can snipe a critical component like a battery, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's the closest we're going to get to the days of old. One of the problems I have is I think I've romanticised what Razor was like quite a lot in my head. I suspect that if I went and actually watched the fights again now, probably wouldn't be as impressive.
To be honest, lots of robots from that era, when I go back, they're not as impressive as I remember.
Yeah.
With the exception of Storm 2 and Tornado, and maybe Danton Kier as well, actually, which was a flipper that I think we forget just how good it was. Most things you just remember more fondly than you really should.
Yeah. Nostalgia. It's a terrible thing.
It is. Do you hold out much hope for Petunia? They've got 2 wins now.
Yeah, they're doing all right, aren't they, I think?
I just can't see them... I can't see them getting anywhere. Shredderator basically died early on, and then they got the free crush, which they almost didn't manage to take. Rotator was kind of a similar deal in terms of the weapons dying, but, you know, that is part of their strategy, to take the hits and then capitalise. I just don't know where to judge them at the moment.
I mean, I think their win against Shredderator was legit, because, like, they took enough hits that resulted in Shredderator going into the wall, which is, like, the worst possible thing for that kind of robot, because the wall doesn't give in any way, so they have to absorb the entirety of the power of their robot. And I think that is a legitimate win if you can force that kind of robot into the wall and have it destroy itself. I think that's legitimate. So I don't want to sort of like I don't want to put Petunia down for having, you know, a free crush in quotes there. It's sort of, you know, they did all the right things. I think they won that fight, and I think they're doing well. I don't know if they'll be selected for the final tournament thing or not.
I think they'd be selected over a lot of others purely for the variety they add in terms of weapon types.
Yeah, but
what I want to see is them up against a non-spinner, because they've had 3 spinners so far. Obviously, one of those didn't go very well at all. So I'd be interested to see if they have anything to offer against, for example, a flipper.
Yeah, or even I think if you put them against something like Chomp, I mean, is there anything on Chomp that they could grab?
The hammer arm.
Yeah,
it's about it, isn't it?
Yeah, and they can sort of like grab that and sort of be a bit sort of controlling with it. But I don't think they could do any damage to something like Chomp.
Well, we'll see who they end up against.
Yep.
From here on, for the rest of this episode, as in our episode, not this episode of BattleBots, that's the thing we're reviewing, I think it's all excellent fights from here. And they've not been bad fights up until now either, really.
Yeah, they are all good fights, aren't they?
This has been an exceptional pair of episodes.
Yeah, I've been really enjoyed watching. I'm still really enjoying BattleBots in general, and yeah, these are solid episodes.
So then, on to something that could easily have been a main event in itself: Yeti versus Bombshell. Bombshell's not been having the best of times.
Nope.
Yeti, in a sense, is out of sorts as well in terms of the way they lost to Ice Wave. That's the kind of defeat that I think would really hurt the Yeti team, because they're all about being able to give out punishment and take their own power.
Yeah.
And in a sense, this is a really good fight for both of them and a really bad fight for both of them. So Bombshell will be really pleased that their weapon has finally managed to work throughout a fight, but they've ended up losing. And Yeti will be very happy to have won, but very upset to have lost the weapon so early.
Yeah, like Yeti won by the skin of their teeth, really, I think. I think if Bombshell had not caught fire at the end, I'm not sure the judges would have given it to Yeti. Because I think for most of that fight, I would have given it to Bombshell personally, but I think it was close the whole way, but I thought I was leaning more towards Bombshell until that last little bit that pushed me back towards thinking, yeah, Yeti have got this. Because like if you end a fight on fire, I think it's safe to say you've lost.
That's pretty much what Naomi Kyle said, isn't it, when they were talking to the judges afterwards. And I'm confused by that segment. I'm really glad the judges have had a chance to explain their reasoning, but I think they've done a really poor job of it because they've not actually mentioned the fact that there is a scoring system.
There's no pleasing you.
That means one of two things. Either there is a scoring system and they don't want to have to explain it, or to decide the outcome of this fight, they somehow bypass the scoring system.
I just think they didn't explain it, man.
Well, we know they didn't explain it.
Yeah, but I don't think there's anything more sinister going on here other than we don't want to explain this scoring system on television.
I'm not saying it's sinister. I'm saying it's interesting.
We're implying that the judges are avoiding the judging criteria to choose who they want to win. That sounds pretty sinister to me.
Well, no. I think they've potentially made a common sense decision of Bombshell is clearly immobile, Bombshell is clearly lost. And I would be okay with that.
No, if they ignore the system in some cases and not others, that's not cool. They've got to consistently apply the rules. That's the point of having rules. If you're gonna ignore the rules, then it's not a game anymore.
It could well be that there's a rule that hasn't been particularly well publicised, whereby if a robot is immobile at the end of a fight but hasn't been counted out, the judges can immediately award it to the opponent. It's possible. It's not necessarily likely, but it's possible. I think it would be fairer, because otherwise we could have been in a situation where they'd had to score the fight in favour of the robot that finished up immobile and on fire. And I think that creates more of a storm.
Yeah, but that's publicity, man, and any publicity is good publicity, right?
Yeah, sure. Tell that to Elon Musk right now.
Oh, God.
Your Lord and Saviour.
He's not. He's never been my Lord and Saviour. I want to make that clear. And
I've seen your little Musk shrine.
And I have no... Shh. And I have no idea what he's doing. I mean, you want to reach through the screen and slap some sense into him.
Let's not get into it. Let's carry on with robots. I have tried to work out some scores on this, and I think it is fairly easy to give it to Yeti anyway, because at most, damage has to be evens.
Yep.
Aggression really has to go to Bombshell. They're the ones with an active weapon for most of the fights. Mm-hmm. But control and strategy, to me, are quite easily Yeti's. Control especially, strategy especially, maybe control is a bit more edgy, but the way that they've managed to just continually throw their dead weapon into Bombshell's weapon, I think was excellent driving and an excellent way of going about the fight once they were dead.
Yeah.
I really struggled with sentences there, I apologise.
So you have to remind me. So the aggression thing is with your primary weapon, isn't it? It's not. Is it an active weapon or primary weapon?
Powered weapon. Primary weapon is the old school way of doing it, which caused problems.
Yeti's forks would count as a powered weapon to me. So like, and they're still using that for a lot. So I think you could give aggression to Yeti as well if you sort of wanted to. I think that could go either way, really, because they got their. I
completely forgot they were a weapon.
Yeah, because they've got them basically the whole time.
Oh yeah, they've smashed it. Then they've smashed it. That's fine. No controversy here. Move along.
Can save our powered weapon controversy for a bit later.
I'm going to say right now, I see no controversy there. Let's let that hang for a while.
Okay.
On to the next fight!
Yeah, hang for not that long, actually.
Go on, introduce it then.
We have Ice Wave versus Scorpius. And this is an interesting fight, I think.
So this is another aggression debate. That's what this comes down to. We know that Ice Wave gets both the damage points. We know that Scorpius gets the control and strategy, so the question is now aggression. Now, it's taken me a while to come round to this conclusion. I think I've been quite vocal about the opposite up until now, but rewatching today especially really changed my mind. Scorpius, after the very first engagement of the fight, the weapon is broken, therefore they cannot demonstrate any aggression. Ice Wave's weapon is still working, therefore they can demonstrate aggression. I can't think of a single instance in that fight where Ice Wave was aggressive. As far as I can tell, every single contact between those two machines was initiated by Scorpius. So while Scorpius can't score a lot of aggression points, Ice Wave completely fails to score them. Now, the judges have to give the point to someone, and I think based on the fact that Scorpios have gone in with the lifter bit that they added to the weapon in that very first engagement, that is the only piece of aggression that can be scored in that fight. So I think that is why Scorpios gets aggression and therefore the win. And I'm completely okay with it.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think I've been on a similar journey, although perhaps less in depth, where I think the first time I watched it,
Shocker.
I sort of couldn't believe that Scorpios got that, because I'm sort of with everyone else in many ways, sort of being like, well, they came out of that pretty. I mean, they survived a lot of hits, but they came out of that not having taken a lot of damage. And, sort of thinking, well, Ice Wave kind of won that because they were, active weapon the whole time. They did all the damage. But then, yeah, they were so... Like, I don't really know how this factors into the judges, but especially on the second watching and stuff, you sort of realise it's not that they weren't in control. It's like they were overwhelmingly dominated by Scorpius for the entire fight. And so it's sort of like, I think Scorpius won, but I guess I hadn't really sort of thought through how that can be justified with the judges' stuff, if that makes sense. And I think you're right. I think the fact that Ice Wave never really sort of initiated an attack, really, as all spinners have to do, really, they just spent the whole time trying to run away to get that weapon up to speed, which they could never do. So yeah, no aggression points, and yeah, damage alone is not enough, it seems.
This is one of those situations where, for the most part, the judging criteria we have very often lead us into situations where the robot that is more impressive ends up losing. And in this case, the machine that was more impressive in terms of the way they performed finally won for once. And I think it is an anomaly. I think in most fights like this, it would go to the one that still has the weapon working and is doing the damage. But I'm really glad this one didn't, because Scorpios completely deserves that win. And something that always irks me with BattleBots compared to Robot Wars is that in Robot Wars, I think it is easier for spinner killers to be rewarded with wins by the judges. Whereas in BattleBots, it's very difficult for that to happen. And I'd like to see it made easier.
Yeah, I think the fact that you need a powered weapon to get aggression points is kind of... That's the thing that sort of really tips it towards spinners in these situations, isn't it? I think it's only by virtue, like you say, of Ice Wave never initiating anything that it kind of has to go to Scorpius by default. But if Ice Wave intentionally did even one or two hits in there, they take that.
Yeah, and those would have been the margins in this.
Yeah.
If Ice Wave had been able to actually show they were initiating one attack, they might well have got this fight. But again, this is a situation where being able to see the judges' scores and having the judges explain it in terms of scores, I think would be better than the hand-wavy, oh, one was on fire at the end. Just respect your audience.
They did mention points in that segment. I forget exactly which judge it was, but like they did, one of them did sort of say, so this happened, so I gave them a point for that kind of thing. Like they did sort of reference it. They weren't all just hand-wavy smoke and mirrors.
But they're doing it without context.
Yeah.
Most viewers won't have the context of knowing what the judging criteria are, or even knowing that it's a points-based system. It's only us saddos that go out and look at the rules.
Hey now.
You're an all-star.
Not a saddo. I'm an enthusiast.
Is that still your Twitter bio?
I think it's enthusiast and also host of Spinnerproof, because I wanted to do some promotion.
Yeah, promotion to all of your followers.
Yeah, all the followers that ever look at my profile, which I have to imagine is none. Yeah, host of Spinnerproof, enthusiast. That's what I am.
Oh wow, Spinnerproof has made it up to first.
Yeah, with 99 plus notifications.
Naturally.
Because someone tweeting now counts as a notification for some reason.
Let's not get into it. We don't have the time. We're on such short time tonight.
But I want to complain about how awful Twitter is.
All these wasted tangents. I could do a whole hour and a half talking about Stardew Valley and what a great game it is, but no time.
Skyrim has utterly consumed me, right? I found...
That's why your notes are so crap.
So, maybe. So I... On the PC, right, the controls on the PC, you're using like the tab key as sort of like a back button, and whenever you're navigating the awful user interface where you're using a mouse, you're using the tab button to sort of go back. And what I found myself is when I'm at work and doing stuff, often I'm sort of using escape to close things or back out of things and stuff. And rather than going to escape, I've started going to tab. So this is not good. My muscle memory has gone, tab now means back. It does not mean indent the code. It doesn't mean anything else. It means go back.
Have you started dreaming about the game yet?
I played basically all of the Dragonborn DLC in one sitting, and then that night I had some pretty strange dreams.
Oh man, let's just kill this tangent now before it goes too far and get on to episode 10, which I have subtitled The Driving Masterclass.
Yeah, there's a lot of good driving in this.
Yeah, that's why I called it The Driving Masterclass.
Yeah, that's a good subtitle.
It's informative.
Right, and should we start with Hypershock versus free shipping?
We shall, on account of it having happened first, have to question the free shipping wedge.
I've got two things to say about that. I would call that like the wedge, in the same way that there is the kilogram in France. That is the wedge. That's how we will measure all other wedges from now on, I think. And I'm guessing your other question about it is, does that count as an active weapon?
Well, yeah, is it a powered weapon? Because at no point do we see it move. We know that the mechanism got absolutely savaged by Huge in their fight. And I know they had to replace the whole thing. So I'm wondering if it went out and just didn't work, or they had to rush it out and it wasn't working to begin with, and everyone just went, okay, we'll let that slide. I don't know what's going on with it, but they didn't use it.
I think they just had no reason to use it. This is getting dangerously close to whatever that fight was with Storm 2, where they didn't use the weapon and nearly lost the... Or did they initially lose it and then it got overturned or something? There was something weird about that, wasn't there?
You read my mind. I was going to bring it up. The story goes that the producers tried to get the judges to disqualify them for not using their weapon, and the judges told them where to go.
So I think we're sort of getting dangerously close to that by sort of question. Like, I'm gonna trust that it was capable of moving, but on first viewing, I did sort of think just the way it's attached and all that kind of stuff. You sort of think it'd be nice if they. It would be really great if in that first little moment where they sort of activate the robots and do their little test routine, if they lifted it at that point, just to show everyone this does move. We just have no reason to use it in this fight.
Yeah, it's exactly it. I feel that demonstrating that your weapon works should be part of the Twitch test. And I also think it's very prudent, especially if a fight goes to the judges, to, after the buzzer, quickly demonstrate what works. Which I think we're starting to see. Well, I say starting to see. I'm starting to notice teams do that a lot. Like Chomp, for example, once a fight was done, would give the hammer a quick flick to show that it still works.
Very, very wise.
Which I'm sure is the only reason they keep winning judges' decisions.
Stop it.
That and the sexism.
Stop it.
Oh, mate, I'm coming back to it in the main event, don't worry.
Oh, God. Does a flamethrower count as an active weapon? Or a powered weapon or whatever?
No.
No.
Not within the rules, at least. Maybe in your heart.
No, I don't really sort of have a feeling one way or the other. It was a genuine question. I don't know.
We both know you love flamethrowers.
Flamethrowers are cool.
And free shipping has basically the best one.
No, I still think Complete Controls is the best flamethrower.
Well, yeah, but they're not in this series, are they?
I know they're not in this series, but like they.
I'd also argue Complete Control doesn't have a flamethrower; it has a blowtorch.
Oh God!
It doesn't throw flames. It's very short range, very focused.
How far would it have to go for it to be a flamethrower?
I don't know at the crossover point, but it's like the difference between a torch and a laser.
No, but that's not range of how far the photons go. That's how in phase the photons are.
Yeah, it's about focus.
Yeah, and the blowtorch thing is more focus. Like the one that Complete Control has a more focused thing. It's just a focused flamethrower.
It's a more focused flame than a flamethrower. It doesn't throw the flames.
It does throw them. It's throwing flames.
Could you catch the flames from Complete Control?
You couldn't catch them from anything else.
You could. You get like a big box and...
You know those vortex cannons, right? If you had one of those that shot some kind of fireball, that would be a flamethrower, right?
That would be the best thing ever is what that would be. That would be a flame cannon.
A flame cannon.
That needs to be a whole new class of weapon.
Yes, even less effective than a flamethrower.
But way cooler.
Yeah, I agree.
Just imagine the full-on Pokemon vibe that would give off.
Oh, man. Would that count as a projectile weapon?
Oh, no.
Projecting plasma.
Were you aware, by the way, of the no flame zone in the arena?
No.
If you look very carefully, there's a change in colour towards the outside of the arena, which is basically the area that you're not allowed to... I think it's either fly drones or use flames, or it might be just use flames, for fear of damaging the walls.
Ah.
Or maybe just covering them in soot, which would be annoying. I don't know which one is the bigger concern.
I think with the big, like, yellow flamethrowers, I think soot is probably the bigger concern.
Oh, could that actually be our defining point between flamethrower and blowtorch? Flame colour.
I mean, you could have a green flamethrower, you could have a green blowtorch.
No, I mean in terms of the basic distinction between blue flame and basically complete and incomplete combustion is what I'm talking about.
So you want incomplete combustion for a flamethrower, do you?
Yes.
I mean, you can have that definition. I would still call the thing that Complete Control has a flamethrower. So
That's now the official Spinnerproof definition.
what? Oh God!
It's a well-known fact that I am the assigned definer of things on this podcast. It is basically all that I offer at this point.
You defined yourself as the definitive definer of the show.
That's how you would get a role like that, surely. I mean, how else?
So Hypershock in this fight was very bouncy and very quick, and I'm not sure their weapon was working very well.
This is definitely a fight of two hilariously fast robots.
Hypershock is ridiculously quick.
It's so quick that it accidentally flips itself at times. It is genuinely like a remote control monster truck. That's exactly what it is, and it's beautiful because of it.
You can really see the camera operators struggling to sort of keep up with it at times.
Oh yeah. Much wider angles than we're used to in this fight.
Wide angles, and it's still panning, like left, right, left, right.
Yeah. Much like watching tennis.
They don't do that in TV though, do they? You don't have like a camera that's going left, right, left, right. They just have a big wide shot.
Yeah, and you have it from one end because tennis is dumb.
That makes sense though, actually, because you could probably, if you kept switching it, it'd be really confusing to know who's who.
Oh yeah, it'd be very annoying.
So that's probably why it's one end.
To take this back to what we're meant to be talking about, as far as I'm aware, those aren't pneumatic tyres on Hypershock. I believe, and I can't remember where I found this out, I think it was from seeing a picture of a damaged wheel. I think they are actually foam-filled, which makes their bounciness even more confusing.
Maybe it's a very light foam.
Yeah, because normally the sort of foam that teams like to use for their wheels is basically just pool noodles. Just cut little wedges out of pool noodles and they go perfectly into a tyre shape and you shove that inside the rubber.
I guess they've just, I wonder if they've just, some kind of like spray expanding foam in there or something.
I don't think it's even that. I think it is just some foam that has been cut and shaped to the tyre.
Fair enough. Well, they bounce a lot. I feel like that's a bit of a weakness. It's fun to watch, but I think...
I mean, this version of Hypershop has a new Hypershop. It's a place where you can really buy stuff. This version of Hypershock has a lot of weaknesses, but it's bright yellow-green, and that makes it okay.
I mean, it still just looks freaking awesome. This is still one of my favourite-looking robots ever. But yeah, the bounciness does detract a little bit because you sort of go, that's not good. That's a bit, and I still think that they're in need, like other robots. I feel like they're kind of in need of some kind of feeding device on the front of their robot for that for their drum.
They do have the arms.
Yeah, or the arm.
It should really be doing that job. Yeah, arm in this case. I don't know what they were dropping weight for.
That is a good question. Did they put a bigger weapon?
Maybe they've done some internal changes.
Yeah.
I think they had to change how they were mounting the top armour as well, so maybe that took up quite a lot of weight.
Well, it's a shame the way this fight ends, really.
Yeah, no. I quite like the fact that we get to see a flamethrower being effective-ish. Albeit in a very circumstantial way.
Was it effective, or was it just covering Hypershock in soot?
I mean, either's good with me. It messed up a wheel.
It did mess up a wheel, to be fair.
And the flamethrowing coincided with smoking and may therefore have had a causal relationship.
Maybe. I mean, correlation is not causation. I think that the overwhelming sort of takeaway from this fight is it just shows the power of having just a wedge on the front of your robot.
Yeah.
Still demonstrating that is the most effective weapon in combat robotics.
Yeah. It takes us all back to that Mr. Psycho tweet. It is the greatest weapon known to man.
Yep. If only teams were allowed to use it.
Do you reckon that'll ever happen in BattleBots?
No.
The thing is, because there's already a selection process there by the producers, I really don't see why they don't accept applications of robots like that. And if they don't like them, they can just reject them. But take applications, see if someone does something really interesting with it, and see if you think they can add something to the field. Because I still think that having Original Sin, as fun as free shipping is, having the actual normal version of Original Sin would be brilliant. It's a very good robot.
It'd be interesting because they're willing to play with the format a little bit more. Like most of this, all these fights so far have been sort of like producer selected. You could have just robots with no active weapons in in there and only line them up with robots where that would be an interesting fight. Like you probably wouldn't, like I wouldn't put that against something like Bronco, and I'm sort of confused about why Duck versus Bronco was a thing. So it's sort of like I would be interested in putting those things against the spinners and stuff. But then I guess you to sort of like balance that out and stuff, because you sort of like have to imagine that at least one of those wedges will do quite well at destroying the spinners, if nothing else. You sort of have to wonder, will they have to put other restrictions on somehow, I don't know, or line up fights in a certain way, or not let them compete in the final like round of 16 bit of it or something, I don't know.
Part of me wants to say just have them as exhibition fights.
Yeah.
Which we're kind of seeing already. There are robots there that supposedly aren't eligible for the final 16. So I don't see why they would have to conform to the full rules that everyone else is. I think the fear with wedges is when you get down to wedge versus wedge. They can be excellent fights. They can be wonderful, aggressive fights that go the full distance, and they're well worth watching. Or they can be dreadful. They can be the worst kind of bashy-bashy where you've got two robots with roughly the same pushing power, roughly the same speed, and they're just going head-to-head occasionally and there's not much happening.
It's kind of no middle ground with that, is there? It's like it's either a really good fight or it's a really bad fight.
And I wonder if you do have to be a bit more of a connoisseur to enjoy a wedge fight. I think lots of people, you know, I hate using this term, but I keep doing it, the casual viewers.
Those filthy casuals.
Yeah, those horrible people that make this show possible. Hate them. Awful. You know, most viewers want to see sparks and stuff getting ripped apart, and I can completely empathise with that. And I think the only way for people to realise that a wedge can be good is to put on some fights, like you say, that are wedge versus spinner and see what happens. I would much rather have whoops than duck. Just put whoops in with the old school heavy plough on the front, put that up against Tombstone, and you've possibly got a hell of a fight on your hands. We could still have a really good fight with duck, but I'd much rather duck were allowed to be duck and just do what it does best without having to put the token lifter on.
That's interesting, actually, because I actually probably think that against something like Tombstone, having a wedge that can really take the hits would be a better fight than anything else, because it's so much more likely to go the distance, and you get so many more of those big hits and stuff, and it's going to be really interesting. I guess it's sort of interesting that by not allowing them, you kind of ensure that that's a shorter fight that Tombstone will win. And it'd be a far more tense fight, it'd be far more interesting if it was like, well, you've got a robot here, it's got no weapon, but it will still got a really good chance of beating Tombstone. It would really highlight the weakness that these spinners have, because so often they win their fight so quickly. You just think, oh, spinners are this perfect weapon, because you never sort of see the impact that they have on themselves. I guess you sort of like if you really get into combat robots and sort of start watching them more and sort of getting involved in it a bit more, you sort of come across this idea and you start to sort of spot actually they want to win these fights quickly. But if you're sort of one of the more, you know, filthy casuals, then you might sort of think, oh, spinners are the best. Why doesn't everyone do them? And the answer is because, well, they have serious drawbacks, which are kind of masked by the rules of the show.
The main reason that Tombstone versus Minotaur was a good fight wasn't the size of hits, it was the number of hits. It wasn't the damage done, it was the hits survived that made it great. That could so easily have gone the distance, and it was brutal, and it was amazing because of it. And I still think one of the best fights I've ever seen footage of, which I know I've put in show notes before, but I'll do it again because it's worth watching again, is Whoops versus Last Rites, which Whoops wins by just taking the hits and taking the hits. And eventually Tombstone Last Rites just smashes itself to pieces and ends up laid on the floor with its batteries hanging out, arcing everywhere. It's one of the most spectacular deaths you could possibly see. I'd much rather see that than Tombstone go up to something once, hit it, send it spinning across the arena in what is a very interesting hit, and then it not move, which is what we have in quite a few Tombstone fights.
Yeah, it's funny actually. You sort of think about like that description of Last Rites at the end there. You sort of think, what if you imagine you see that robot, you see it's like a shot of that robot at the end of it, and it's sort of like the big teaser is like, who did this to Tombstone? And no one in the audience is going to go, oh, the robot with no weapon did that to Tombstone.
Although they'd still be wrong, because the answer is Tombstone did that to Tombstone.
Tombstone did do that to Tombstone, but you know...
Or in this case, Last Rites. Let's just be very pedantic here.
But I'm sort of like, if they allowed it in BattleBots and it was Tombstone, that would be an interesting way of an interesting form of promotion, I think.
That would be a really fun game in general, actually. Who did this damage?
Who did this damage? Who is responsible? skip blame. It's easy.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Should we finally get on to the next fight?
Okay then.
Red Devil versus Sub-Zero.
I mean, the most shocking thing in this is that Sub-Zero apparently only has 9 flips in it.
Is that the number they gave?
That's the number the commentators, I forget exactly which one, said along the lines of, remember, Sub-Zero only has 9 or 10 flips. And I'm like, what? That's
Is that
insane.
9 or 10 flips or 9 or 10 at full power and then diminishing returns from there?
That's a good question. I mean, the way it was phrased just suggests 9 or 10 flips. I suspect it's one of those things where they're sort of omitting certain truths to make that sound more interesting.
I feel like they just pulled a number out their backsides, to be honest, but...
Well, it was just interesting because they pulled that number out then for Sub-Zero, but then for Bronco, which is a similar robot, it's a better execution of that idea, but it's a similar robot, and they were sort of quoting like 30 or 40 flips for that thing. So you sort of got to wonder what's different between those robots. So Sub-Zero just got a tiny little reservoir in there of gas.
I mean, it could be that it's just really inefficient, or it could be that the stat is bollocks.
That too, yeah.
I still think that's the most likely explanation.
Yeah.
Although it has to hold on to its flipper long enough to do more than 2 or 3 anyway, which seems to be a challenge.
Well, yeah, it doesn't matter anyway because they got one flip in and then it never reseated, so they never got another good one. So
It was a decent flip.
yeah, good flip. You know, it'd be nice if they got more than one in a fight, but they got one.
But then Red Devil clearly wasn't working properly in this fight.
Do you reckon what wasn't working about it? What are you?
So you know how Red Devil is basically a weapon pod and 2 track pods connected via an axle at the back? It seemed like the track pods and the weapon pods weren't able to move on that axle under their own power. It seemed like it was just passively sat there hanging.
Yeah, so I thought that was because of the flip that Sub-Zero did, because they flipped it on the weapon pod, and they sent basically just by virtue of inertia and stuff, sent just that thing flying. And I wonder if that did a bunch of internal damage to Red Devil that sort of prevented their mechanism there from working.
Oh, it's possible, yeah.
Do you reckon it was broken from the beginning?
I'd want to go back, watch the pre-fight, and see if in their Twitch test they did lift the lifter. I feel like they didn't, because I feel like the fight they had against Monsoon will have done a lot of damage to that mechanism. And considering the guy that actually built it, Jerome Miles, wasn't there, that might have been something that was a bit too much for the team that were there to repair effectively. Because they'll have had a lot to do after that Monsoon fight.
Yeah, I guess you sort of want to get something that's like mobile enough to put in the arena, but yeah, maybe not 100%. Yeah, I don't know then. I don't know if it was broken before or after, but I mean, I think it's conceivable that Sub-Zero broke it if it was working.
It's possible, yeah, I hadn't considered that as a possibility. That's not the main talking point, though, is it? Even all the sparks that are being thrown by Red Devil, even though it's not actually doing any proper damage because titanium will spark even on a light impact just driving, there's one real talking point here.
We get a drone death of the most spectacular variety.
This is above the level of the Rakening.
Do you think so?
I think so.
I still think the rake thing was better. That was more spectacular, I think, because that was a much luckier shot. This was just like a drone that kind of died of its own accord at some point, and then again kind of accidentally got pushed into the screws. Whereas the rake thing was I know it was lucky, but there was like some intent behind having it happen.
You see, the rake thing came in 2 stages, which was hitting it out of the air and smashing it up. Once it was hit out of the air, you knew what was going to happen. Did you honestly think that when that thing got into the screws, it was going to completely disintegrate? I did not know the screws had that in them.
I didn't expect it to go into the screws, so that was a surprising thing.
I was expecting it to jam the screws up, but oh no.
Really?
No, that's not what we got.
Those drones that's a flimsy drone. There's not going to be any strength in that at all. I don't think it would take much to.
Well, evidently, yeah.
Well, so like, you know, I would never have expected it to jam the screws up, because if they jam the screws up, then the screws are just awful.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that what I was expecting was rational. It's just what I was expecting. I'll never claim to be rational.
Good.
I know myself too well.
It was a cool drone death though. What I really wanted would have been for something to sort of like, because that was a drone with a flamethrower, right? It had a little flamethrower thing in it, and it would have been really nice if the fuel in there caught fire and there was a little fireball, but it didn't happen.
We had a nice poof of gas, but that was about it, wasn't it?
Be great if that poof of gas had ignited. That would have been glorious.
Well, we got something to strive for.
One day.
One of these days. So it goes to the judges. That has to be a 5-0 for Red Devil, surely. Easy win.
Yeah.
Against what I still think I'm willing to say is the only machine in the field that I really don't like.
Well, it really, I mean, whether or not that's like a landslide to Red Devil, I think really depends on whether or not that mechanism was damaged and who damaged it.
True, yeah.
Because if Sub-Zero did do that damage, I think they should get the damage, because that's more damage that they did to Red Devil than Red Devil did to Sub-Zero. I mean, Red Devil did some like very crowd-pleasing scratches on the side of Sub-Zero there.
Some light scuffing.
Yeah. Whereas, like presumably stripping some gears or whatever in that mechanism or whatever it is they would have done to break it, assuming they did it, I would say is, I guess it's less obvious, but it's more damaging.
I can accept that. That's a very rational way of looking at it.
It's a moot point though, because I think Red Devil gets every other point. So
yeah.
Either way, they've won that.
I'm going to let you pronounce the next one.
We have Sharkorpion versus Warhead.
No. Sharkoprion.
Sharkoprion.
I've over-exaggerated that. It's Sharkoprion.
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 Sharkoprion. Sharkoprion.
Versus Warhead, the German competitor.
God.
This is a really good fight.
I wasn't taken by it.
It's a good driving match. It's a good control match. It's got lots of fire. It goes the distance. I'm very happy with this.
It was just like it felt like a bit of a battle of attrition with kind of, it was a very slow trudge towards an inevitable end to me. I never felt like there was any tension. There was never any, Sharkoprion is going to get something here or anything like that. It was always like, well, Warhead has just got the big clamp thing. The spinner on Sharkoprion isn't really enough to do anything, and they can't really get a good contact with it, I don't think. And I sort of thought this is just it's like a slow march towards an inevitable win for Warhead.
Sharkoprion did some decent damage with the one hit they got. I think it was the linkage for the wings that they broke, which Ed Robbins was clearly very happy about. More subtitle shenanigans to enjoy.
He was very happy about everything.
Oh yeah, he's just a very happy man. He's amazing.
My kind of guy.
Just makes stuff out of crap and enjoys using it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's cool that he sort of bought that out of like recycled parts and stuff, and it was again not the world's most effective robot, but I think it was more effective than other robots we've seen that are like that, kind of like
you mean
recycled
the kegs?
Parts, like the kegs, or what was that fiberglass one in Robot Wars?
Narrow that down.
Like the recent Robot Wars, the only fiberglass robot that was recently in Robot Wars was like a turtle thing or something.
Oh, Terror Turtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's by the same guy that made the kegs. So, I mean, one robot made out of recycled parts that did well was Recyclops, the very first flipper in Robot Wars, and the first to flip a house robot, and the precursor to Cassius, the true champion of Series 2, champion of our hearts.
If you say so.
I'm still upset about... Seriously, that broke my child heart.
Take things so seriously, Ryan.
No, I take Robot Wars seriously.
Yeah, that's a thing.
It's serious business. Serious business.
Top men. There's a connection for you.
I'm stalling.
Do you not want to move on?
I'd rather not. Talking of heartbreak.
Heartbreaking, yeah. We have Monsoon versus Son of Waiachi.
I really thought there was a chance.
There was a chance. There was a chance. But they didn't get that chance, really.
Monsoon isn't optimised to defend against other spinners, would be a kind way of saying how this fight went. The pivot system is fantastic. I love it, but it doesn't exactly leave much scope for a honking great wedge, which is kind of what they would have needed in this fight. If going weapon to weapon didn't work, which it didn't, it was painful to watch.
I think the thing that they could have done, maybe, in theory that's possible, would have been to use a different bar that wasn't like a single tooth thing, so they had more opportunity for making contact with Son of Waiachi's weapon there.
So I suppose they've got more chance of being sideswiped with that asymmetric bar. Although I don't know...
It's probably one of those like swings and roundabouts things where like if they have the two teeth, they are increasing the odds of them getting hit, but they're also increasing the odds of them managing to get a really good uppercut. Because they sort of like they didn't have many contacts, but they had a few, and they only got one uppercut out of it. And I wonder if they could maybe have got a few, like maybe one or two.
My brain is now frantically trying to simulate how this all works, and it's not going well. So with the single tooth setup, I would imagine that the only thing that Sanawayachi can get a hit on is the side of the toothed end. I don't think they'd be able to reach the sort of counterweighted end because it's shorter.
I think they could reach it, but Monsoon would be really unlucky if they did. Depends how.
Yeah, it would depend on the closing speed between the two of them.
Yeah.
And the amount of time between the hammers on Son of Waiachi coming round.
Yeah.
Physics. I should know better.
It's my gut feeling that if they had a two-toothed bar there, they would have been more likely to get a hit on Son of Waiachi. But maybe I'm wrong. And maybe the opportunity for Son of Waiachi to get a big hit on Monsoon being increased to be too much to take that risk anyway. So who knows?
One of the issues that Monsoon has had really all season is that when something does happen to the bar, it does serious damage to the weapon. And in this case, it seemed that one of the hits from Son of Waiachi sideswiped enough that the bar was then contacting with the housing. And it was from that point you knew they were screwed. And then the fact that they had a whole side ripped off and were sparking as they flew through the air and then landed on fire pretty much says it all.
I mean, it was a spectacular death.
You can say that again.
It was a spectacular death.
Good man. I'm not Son of Waiachi's biggest fan, but boy, has it delivered some big hits so far.
Yeah, they had a disappointing start, didn't they, with their thing against Bombshell? But yeah, they've been on form since then. Brutus, sorry. You talk about two robots that are similar. Those two.
Yeah, they are really.
They're sort of the same robot. Yes. So like disappointing start there, but I mean, yeah, they've sort of really been knocking it out of the park. Yeah. So far. Or since then,
sport
anyway.
Ball reference.
Yeah, sports ball reference and hitting things. So many things come together there.
Now I want to attach baseball bats to robots to see how far they can hit things.
Probably quite far.
I'm worried Helichopper will get something into orbit.
That would be fast. I'm not sure. I'm going to make a bold statement about physics. I'm not sure it's possible to fire something from like sea level into orbit, like with just the impulse at the beginning alone. I think there's too much air in the way.
Yeah, I suppose if you had something going sufficiently fast, it would experience such incredible air resistance.
Because it's like I think you can shoot something into space from an impulse on the ground at sea level, because there's not a lot of air in that direction. But when you think about getting a stable orbit, you need so much sideways velocity. It wouldn't do it. I guess you must need a correction burn as well to raise your periapsis too. Because if you shot it perfectly parallel, perfectly tangentially to the surface at that point, and you have enough velocity to get out of the atmosphere, it's still got to come. Even if it were in sort of like orbit at that point, the periapsis of that orbit is going to be at sea level, so it's going to re-enter.
I feel like that's not the case, but I can't explain why. I'm just trying to remember how parabolas work and realising that I probably never knew in the first place.
It's not.
What you're saying sounds both intuitively right and intuitively wrong. I mean, if you could launch something fast enough, you could put it into a solar orbit.
Yeah, I think you could put it into the orbit of something else with an impulse from Earth. I'm not sure you could put it into orbit of Earth from an impulse on the surface level of Earth.
You could probably manipulate some kind of Lagrange points. I don't know if I've said that right.
Yeah, if you put it somewhere else to get like a little gravity assist to move the periapsis. Yeah, maybe.
So if we line up Helichopper just right, with a very carefully planned trajectory, we might be able to achieve orbit.
No, I still think there's too much air in the way.
Yeah, I feel like because you're going to have to hit it so hard, you're going to end up with some very strange effects happening ahead of it in the air as it passes through. It's basically going to be doing re-entry in reverse.
Yeah, I think you might even have to get some like relativistic effects in front of it to be going fast enough. Be like that baseball in What If.
Exactly. Talking of things flying, Bronco versus Duck. Yeah. No round of applause for that segue. Okay, that's fine.
I mean, that was a good segue. I'm just like, I still don't. Did you think this was a good matchup? Like, were you excited for this being a main event?
This is the kind of main event I want to see more of, because it is a fight that can reasonably go the distance. This isn't two big spinners that are going to go 3 hits and die. This is two robots that can actually trade blows, two robots that are very well driven, that can entertain us, and they did exactly that, I thought. It's more of a connoisseur's battle, but I'm okay with that, for I am a classy connoisseur.
you're gonna be wearing a fedora before long, man. You need to be careful.
The robot.
I think there were some entertaining moments in this fight, but I think overall, not the most entertaining fight in the world. So I quite enjoyed the two moments that stand out to me is there's the backflip that Bronco does over Duck, which I thought was quite funny, and then when Duck is playing Matador, and Bronco drives into the wall as a result. That was fantastic.
Duck did a fantastic job in this fight. The whole strategy seemed to be to make Bronco waste flips. And they did that by either running straight up the front, so that by the time they timed the flip, they were already almost over, and didn't take the full brunt of it. They did that by doing the sort of Matador thing, as you say, jinking out of the way. They seemed to be tempting them by getting near the walls a lot as well. Sort of making them go for the biggest flip they had available, hoping for that out of the arena, and then diving out of the way. I thought it was an absolutely beautiful bit of driving, which very nearly worked. And I think their whole strategy was to hope that they would run out of gas and, I don't know, possibly flip themselves and not be able to get back over or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what the end game for this would have been. Like, how could Duck have won that fight?
I think Duck can survive that fight, and I think they can possibly start using some arena hazards towards the end. The difficulty they were going to have, as what is essentially kind of a control bot, I suppose, in this fight, is that the moment they did get a lift on Bronco, which they didn't, but had they done it, Bronco would have been easily able to just jump off. So Duck had to wear them down and then see what they could do in the last sort of, say, minute of the fight.
Because I'm sort of thinking that the only sort of two outcomes for this fight, I think, I mean, either Bronco has some kind of catastrophic failure and Duck get a knockout, which seems quite unlikely, or what happens, or Duck sort of survive and it goes to a judge decision. But the way that Duck has to survive means that they're sort of almost they inherently they're not scoring the points they need with the judges, which is why I ask how can they win? Because it's like they can survive the distance, but I think in doing so they lose all the points.
I think they can gain kudos by surviving. Is probably their realistic best case scenario.
So you're going to hope that the judges throw the judging criteria out the window and give them a win because they...
No, not even that. You lose, but you lose having performed well and impressed the people that select the final 16. Not that I think they're going to struggle to get a place in the final 16.
No, I think they'll be there just as the spinner killer.
Yeah, because Vanquish clearly isn't going to play that role. Yeah, I was very happy with this being a fight. I was particularly pleased to see Duck getting Storm 2'd and sort of posted down that little bit. However, there is one issue I have with this fight.
Okay.
It's a very severe issue that I hope people will take very seriously.
This is Ryan code for this is a really weird nitpicky thing. That's what I'm expecting to happen now.
Oh, no. This is something that I know will gain a lot of traction on social media and possibly bring the professionalism of many people at BattleBots into question. And that is the fact that Alison Hayslip, one of the judges, remember, celebrated Bronco's win. And as we all know,
Stop it!
judges can't have personalities or opinions. It's not allowed.
Stop it!
Her professionalism is now entirely called into question. I fully believe that she must never be allowed to judge a Bronco fight again.
You're unbelievable.
Thank you. I don't know how to respond to that. Apart from then launching into the song in my head.
You're unbelievable.
Anything else to say on that fight? Or on the judges and their massive unprofessionalism that completely ruins the integrity of the sport?
The judges are fine. I don't know what your problem is, mate.
Is it a legitimate sporting competition at this point, Sam?
Well, no, because it's entirely fabricated.
Minor detail. You see, what I'd like to do right now is break the tension by squeaking the squeaky rubber chicken I got for 50p in a pound shop, which was closing down, hence the discount. However, unfortunately, I picked up one that didn't have a squeaker, so this is what it sounds like instead. I was going to have so much fun with this squeaky rubber chicken, and it's been ruined for me. And I can't tell if I'm more annoyed about the microphone or the chicken at this point.
I need a clip of that sound from your good microphone to use as the end sound at some point.
The worst thing is, I realised as soon as I paid for it just wasn't worth going back because I was with other people, and I didn't want them to realise how obsessed I was by the idea of having this chicken. Just imagine, you're at a summer school that you've paid multiple thousands of pounds to be at, and one of the people who's meant to be looking after you comes into your room at night to check that you're in bed and just squeaks a rubber chicken. I mean, it couldn't give you a better impression if you tried.
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/35. And there you can find links to all the robots we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your favourite squeaky toy.
Does mine even count?
Well, it doesn't squeak, so... How do you define a squeak? You know, what is a squeak?
Ooh.